read that you got into this because you wanted to make a movie about being trapped underwater. Is there anything that sparked that specifically?
Yeah, there was a submarine disaster in the year 2000. A Russian submarine called the Kursk went down off the north coast of Russia, and a lot of people died immediately, but some people survived in one chamber where there was still oxygen, and they survived for several days, and they were sort of tapping and sending signals to the surface, but then nobody could rescue them, it was so deep, and the oxygen ran out, and they all died. And I thought, that has got to be one of the worst scenarios for dying ever. And I thought, yeah, there's a movie in that, isn't there? And then began to think, well, why are they there? Wouldn't it be cool to make a submarine movie where they're not Navy, they're kind of somehow civilians, and they've got in this situation, and what are they doing? They must be looking for some kind of treasure or quest kind of thing. So that was kind of how the story developed. And then I gave that idea to Dennis Kelly, the writer, and he came up with the rest of it, all these great characters.
Can you tell me about choosing him to write the film? Because first feature, he has mainly theater background. It's a surprising choice.
Well, I chose him because he is from a theater background, and he'd written some great plays, some darkly comic plays, and I felt that the submarine movie is a bit like a play, you know, because you've got these number of characters. They're all going to be accounted for at all times. They're all in, you know, they're maybe in 3 or 4 different parts of the submarine, but they're all kind of there, and you've got to know what they're doing, and there's no, you know, can't go anywhere else. You're just in this one place. It's like a theater. So I thought that would be good, but also it turned out that he's just a great writer. And he's now actually subsequently, since we started this, his career has taken off in a big way. He wrote Matilda the musical.
I was looking that up, and I'm like, well, yeah, he should probably have that.
Yeah, he's got a great sense of humor, and he's brilliantly imaginative. And he also wrote this great TV series Utopia, which I don't think has been shown over here, but David Fincher is remaking it for, I think, HBO this year or next year, and that's one of the best bits of TV that's been on in Britain for years and years. It's a kind of weird conspiracy thriller kind of thing.
I've never seen it, but now I kind of want to check that out.
Yeah, you'd like it. It's odd.
So how much did the script change from just the conception of this whole idea to what we see on screen now? Because I think the way it was presented in the press notes, it almost made it seem like you did a couple of drafts before he was like a heist movie. That's what this should be.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I think that initially there were more characters, and initially it was less sort of clearly, I guess, less clearly focused on the heist. Although that was always there, the idea that they're trying to get this gold off an old Nazi U-boat, sort of sneaking underneath the authorities to get it. So no, it didn't change that much in terms of the story. It became more nuanced, I think, and the characters became better, and the structure became better. And also, there's a lot of things that iron out in a sub movie because it's very technical. It's kind of like, is that possible? And why would that happen? And what is it? You know, how does that work? And so trying to make those things as simple as possible, the sort of technical aspects of it.
How realistic is that? I mean, I'm terrible with history, so I don't know what negotiations and deals went on. But like, did any of that come from real fact?
Yeah. I mean, there's kind of like, hey, like it's fiction, but it is rooted in bits of truth, and that's what Dennis is great at, taking a little moment of reality and then extrapolating it to make a fiction. So he's got the story about, you know, this gold was being sent from Stalin to Hitler in 1941 to dissuade Hitler from invading Russia. Well, he didn't, I don't think, send gold. Nobody's heard that story, but Stalin was terrified that Hitler was going to invade. They had this pact with each other, the Hitler-Stalin pact, but Stalin knew that at some point Hitler was going to invade, and sure enough he did. So it's not impossible. The whole idea of Nazi gold on a U-boat, many stories about that. There was a story which was inspiration for us, which was about a U-boat which at the end of the war refused to surrender, and although it was signaled many times, it kept going towards Norway. They thought this must have some really valuable stuff in it. Why are they trying to get away? Who is it? Is it war criminals, or is it treasure, or what is it? The RAF bombed the U-boat. It went down in deep waters off Norway. For years and years, everyone thought there must be gold on that. There must be treasure. So eventually, in the 90s, a salvage company did get the U-boat to the surface. No gold. But there was like top secret new weaponry that was why they didn't want anyone to find. It was kind of self-guided torpedo. Was on this. They didn't want the Allies to get that. So there's bits and pieces of truth in history. I mean, another thing that's true is that, you know, a crucial element of the plot is that below a certain depth, the Black Sea is anoxic, which means there's no oxygen. And if there's no oxygen, there's no rust, there's no decay, wood doesn't rot, nothing rots. That is true. At below about 100 meters, the Black Sea, nothing rots. So you've got, down on the bottom of the Black Sea, you can see it on YouTube, you can see pictures of galleons from the Roman times and Phoenician times sitting there with their masts still standing because there's nothing rotting it away. It's 2,000 years old. So that he used all these little bits of truth and embroidered them into a story.
That's a fun detail. I'm surprised there's not more movies about some of these true stories that you've referenced, like just straight adaptations of those. Because like this environment too is so rich, and I mean the stuff that you've kind of created on screen is pretty incredible. Can you talk a little bit about just taking this idea and also bringing it to your producers? I mean, I know you produced the film as well, but is there that fear, like, we've got this great script, we can make a submarine movie, but like, holy shit, how are we going to get all these pieces together and get the actors' schedule correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a movie that you can make really cheaply, but on the other hand, it's not a movie, we didn't want to make it with, 3 really inappropriate big American stars. We wanted to be true to the origins of it and true to the kind of people who would be on a submarine. So we cast really character actors in all the parts except Jude Law, and a lot of people are like, Jude Law in a submarine? That doesn't. But I think, hopefully you'll agree that he gives a performance completely unlike anything you've ever seen him do before, and he's very masculine, very dominating, very authoritative in the role, and he fits right in with the character actors. That's what I think is so good, is that he feels like he's another one, like he's Scoot McNairy or he's Ben Mendelsohn or one of these other characters. He feels like he is, just one of them in a way. And so we were able to make it at a budget where it was we were able to be true to ourselves and true to the kind of movie we wanted to make and keep it kind of pretty tough and kind of uncompromising and scary, but we were able to have enough money to do the underwater sequences, those big underwater action sequences and explosions and things like that. So it was a fine balance, keeping control, doing the movie you want to do, but having enough money to do the things that you need to do.
What does cost more in this scenario, like building your sets, doing the underwater tank stuff, or actually going on the real submarine?
Well, that's the funny thing. I thought. See, I said to the line producer, I said, "Oh, we'll shoot it on the real submarine. We found this real Russian sub outside London," and I was like, "Yeah, that's going to be. It's going to save so much money." And they're like, "No, because we got to float down pontoons to go around the thing. We got to put toilets on the pontoons. We got to have boats that take you back and forward every day." And she's like, "And I said, okay, right, I see. It's more expensive to be on the real submarine, but we still did that because the authenticity of this amazing 1964 Russian sub was just so." Incredibly detailed and beautiful and weird inside there. So I was like, we have to shoot there. So we shot the torpedo tube room and when various corridors and one of the engine rooms on that submarine. And then after having done that, we took all the actors and now they'd experienced, which like on a real sub, we took them onto a set and did the rest of it on a set and then underwater in a tank.
What were you able to do on that submarine, just in terms of, does it have to be straight conversations, or can you do any of the more effect-heavy bits? Because I know someone else owned that submarine, too.
Yeah, no, we couldn't do it. Well, we did do some bits where we had water bursting in and things. It was just complicated, but, we weren't allowed to drill any holes in it or anything, but, we hid pipes around it. I mean, there's so many pipes on these things anyway, and wires and stuff, that you can hide stuff really easy. So we did do some stuff where there's water jetting in and stuff, but generally you can't do anything. Obviously, you can't move it, so the bits where the submarine's going to go... You can't do that with the real sub. We couldn't actually get it. It's got no propeller and the engine doesn't work anymore on this submarine, so we couldn't actually use it for the bits where you see the submarine moving along above the surface, for instance. So that was a combination of using an element of the real submarine and then CG and a real helicopter shot and all combined together. Yeah. So. But I think more than anything else, it's just about the texture of reality that you get from the real sub, and that when you then also for the designer, when he knows his sets have to match that and they have to be as good as that makes him up his game and think, oh, I got to really make this good. How
do you take what you shoot on the submarine to the studio? Because I imagine on the submarine, like you said, you can't really move anything, so you've got to place your camera and your lighting where you can, and that's it. But do you want to take the liberty to kind of make sets that move apart and maybe have certain spaces when you get there?
Well, that was actually one of the big decisions, because the thing about sub films is that a lot of what's great about them is about the claustrophobia. about the fact that you can't move around too much and that, it feels like you're trapped in this space. But at the same time, that can get pretty boring when you're stuck in one room like for 6-7 days and you've used every camera angle that you can think of to cover already, and you've still got more scenes and you can't really move the actors around much because they're just so tight. But on the other hand, if you take off the side of the set and throw the camera around on a crane or whatever, suddenly it feels wrong because you're breaking the claustrophobia. And so if I did try when we first went onto the set. I thought, well, maybe we'll do that. We'll take the side of the set off, then we can get wider shots. And it just felt wrong, totally wrong. And so I quickly put the side of the set on, and then the rest of the movie is filmed always with the camera inside the set, so that you don't ever sort of break the feeling that I'm inside the submarine. And of course, because the set was exactly the same dimensions as the real submarine, it was pretty, it was claustrophobic. It was difficult, but of course you can always leave and go to lunch, whereas you couldn't do on the real sub.
How'd the crew that you had on the real sub to the set compare? Well, I assume one was much smaller than the other.
Well, we had a big crew on the submarine, but they had to stay on the pontoon, stay outside, so the hair and makeup and all the electricians and stuff had to stay outside. And just the basic shooting crew, 5-6 people. And the actors could go in at any one time into the submarine, and there would be that feeling of being entombed, because you kind of in the morning you get in there, you get the lights in, and then somebody would go and they'd close the hatch.
That was one of the notes I wrote. I loved the sound when the hatch closes.
Yes.
I'm like, that kind of defines the rest of the movie.
Well,
you are
I'm
stuck
glad
in
you
there.
noticed that, because I obsessed over that sound. Because when they first did the sound design, I did something, and I was like, no, that's got to be the sound of the tomb closing. That that's the last time you're going to see fresh, real light and fresh air and.
God, it must be such a crazy attention to detail you need for the sound in this movie. Just everything. I mean, the character that listens to the sound, too. I was fascinated by that part.
Yeah.
Because I almost didn't even understand how that worked, like how that job works with him, just having to block out the noise that's coming from the actual sub itself.
Yeah, so he's kind of using primitive version of sonar, kind of Russian homemade sonar, because the sonar is broken, and they do this thing where they bang along on the side of the sub, and then he listens to the echoes coming back and draws a kind of diagram of what he thinks, which is feasible. Very difficult, but feasible. What's not so feasible and is kind of bit liberties is when then later on they're moving along and he's using the engine sound to do that. That's maybe a little fudged.
Is there any real person out there who's capable of doing that you drew from?
No, the first part of it, when they were sort of banging inside the sub, yes, that is feasible, because there's no noise. But when the engine's going, he wouldn't stand a chance. You can't really tell anything, because if they'd been floating along and they'd had just a single sound and you could hear it echoing back, then yeah, but not with all that.
This movie makes me want to go research every position in the submarine. I mean, because everybody is really defined. You have a huge cast here, and everyone's doing their specific job, and their job is so important too, and you feel it with every single person.
Well, I think that's the thing, is that you've got in a submarine, you're dependent on the rest of the crew, and if one person fucks up, then you're all gone. So you've got to rely on everybody. Everybody's got to be really responsible about what they do, and that's always why on submarine films things always start to go wrong just when somebody starts getting unhappy, and that one person, the unity of the crew, falls apart, and then.
And isn't that one person always Ben Mendelsohn in every movie?
Yes, it's got to be Ben Mendelsohn.
He's always fantastic, though. He
is great. He's so good at flipping out.
Can you tell me a little bit about your cast here? Because I liked the detail in the notes where you're talking about the divide between the language and just the way everybody conducts themselves on the sub, too.
Yeah.
Can you even, as the director, just trying to pay attention to the story and nailing lines and where everybody is, can you hear people's accents and, break down the language yourself?
Well, I obviously, when it's all the English-speaking characters have got, there's an Australian accent in there, there's an American accent with Scoot Mary, there's a Liverpudlian accent with a little boy, Tobin. Jude's accent is from the northeast of Scotland, his Aberdeen accent. So they've got all very different, and so they're all differentiated by that accent. And then you've got the Russians, and the Russians of course, I don't speak any Russian, so I had a translator next to me the whole time, and the Russians didn't really speak any English except for one of them who spoke a bit. And so it's very hard for me to tell whether they're doing a good job. But I hired some of the best actors in Russia. I mean, these guys aren't just sort of day players. These are like proper stars in Russia. They're a big deal in Russia, most of these guys. So I kind of had to trust that they really, knew what they were doing and were saying things that work. And I'm pleased to hear that I just got told the other day that we're getting released on like 900 screens in Russia, so which is more than we're on here in America. So I'm pleased about that.
Can you tell me a little bit about the young guy who plays Tobin?
Yeah, so
Because
his name,
he's fantastic.
Yeah, he's great. He's such a funny. He's one of those guys. He's called Bobby Schofield, and he looks kind of in one moment he looks like really nerdy and geeky, and then there's another moment he looks he's quite
He
kind of good
reminded me
looking.
a little of Ansel Elgort.
Oh,
He's
that's
got like a
interesting.
very similar look to him.
Yeah,
and-
very very upright.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good way to describe it.
Yeah, no, they are similar. I've met Ansel a couple of times, and there is something similar. But this is his first film. He had never really been to London before. He came down for an audition, took the bus down, and he was just great in his audition. And I was actually late. He was the last one, or maybe he was late or something. I had to leave, so I saw him for like 4 minutes, but he stuck in my head, and then so I got him to come down again. I took him to Jude's house. It was his second time to London. He's going to Jude Law's house, and he's like, "Oh my God, where am I?" And he read with Jude, and was like one of these guys who's just like so confident, even though he was 18 years old and really kind of had done nothing before, but very confident and very sweet, and cast in there and then, and I think he provides a kind of a little relief, a little sweetness in amongst all the masculinity. All
It
the
needed
testosterone.
that. I
It
like
did
that
need
element.
A little sweetness.
So to wrap up, can you tell me a little bit about that 3D project you mentioned before? Because I'm not particularly into any 3D I
Well, look,
see
here's the
now.
thing,
So
I don't like 3D. I think 3D is like a big false dawn. I think the movie industry got suckered into thinking they should invest so much in 3D, and nobody likes it. Does anyone like 3D? My kids, if I offer them to go, do you want to go and see this in 2D or 3D? It's like, 2D, please, I hate 3D. They hate it. And it's more expensive too, so it's kind of like, everybody hates it and it's more expensive. Why?
my dad threw up when he saw Avatar, and now I can't get him to see any 3D movie ever.
Look, I mean, there are a couple. Gravity and Avatar would say it was worth seeing in 3D, but pretty much nothing else is. So this is because, and I'm not a scientist, this is what I've been told. This is because the 3D that we have now doesn't really work in the way that the human physiology actually works, in the way that your eyes work and create a sense of 3D. So there's a guy who has a company called Magic Leap, and his name is Roni Abramovich, and he has developed. He came from a kind of medical research background, where doing things like artificial limbs and this kind of thing, where human biology interacts with technology. And he became interested in 3D. Why does 3D not work? And he's developed this new technique, which is a new kind of 3D, where objects can appear in the room that you're in. So if you're wearing glasses, you can see the room that you're in, or outside, or wherever. And then they scan the environment, and they can place 3D objects in that environment. So a character could appear on this table here. So this is still in very early stages, and I'm getting involved in a project. One of the first things that they do using this, which is a kind of a combination between a documentary and a planetarium and a theatrical show with a scientist, a famous physicist in England called Brian Cox, and we're going to try and make a kind of show using this new technology. It's pretty exciting.
Do you think it has a future in film?
I think so. Yeah, I think it has a future in education, in medicine. I mean, he wants to do things like have you can do a scan of the interior of somebody's body, and see it in 3D if you're a doctor, so you can walk around and see where the problems are and things like that. So it's pretty cool.